afternoon again, everyone. As we kick off the afternoon sessions on PCI DSS, let me just ask how many in the audience, and I'll try and see you, are currently working on PCI DSS version 4 implementations, thank you, or are planning for your first PCI DSS assessment? Well, the good news is you're in the right place. This is the place to be this afternoon. And we're really excited to start with this panel that we have here today. We have this unique opportunity to hear from these global organizations who are in the same position as you, and they are currently working through this or have worked through this, and they can certainly share their experiences. So we're going to start with just some quick introductions from the panelists. Tomás, I'll start with you at the end and come downwards.
Yeah, my name is Tomás Perlines. I'm head of payment security for Schwarz Group. Whoever doesn't know this company, maybe here in Ireland or in other places in Europe, you may know the Lidl stores or Kaufland stores in Central and Eastern Europe. So basically a grocery retailer. We do also some other businesses, but let's focus on the merchant side.
Hi, I'm Katie Cowman, and I am an ISA and PCIP at Barclaycard. I'm part of the team that looks after the compliance of our gateways for PCI across many different variations. And I also work really closely with the team in acquiring that looks after our merchants' PCI DSS assurance as well.
And my name is Josh Knopp. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for a company called Enterprise Holdings, which you probably know better as Enterprise Rent-A-Car, National, and Alamo.
Great. Well, now we know who you all are, we can start with the grilling. So to kick off this session, I'm going to start with Tomás and Josh as merchants. If you could share some of your initial impressions as you started implementing PCI DSS version 4.
So actually, being a merchant, we cater for the SAQs. And if you look into the different SAQs, there's not that much change between version 3.2.1 and version 4. So of course, applying the SAQ P2PE or the SAQA for card not present payment channels is something you can already start off. However, we have to be quite careful in the new reporting documents, like the report on compliance document. The templates have slightly been changed, and we need to be very careful in completing the appropriate template.
So we're a little bit different than Tomás's structure, where we rely more on a report on compliance. We have a couple small business lines that do an SAQ, but predominantly we do a report on compliance each year. And so one of the items that we saw when we were looking at the new version of the DSS was we're going to need more time. So we've had, and I'll touch on some of that coming up, but we did identify that we needed to get some communication out front ahead of our effort and make sure that we had some top level of executive support.
Yep, that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned the SAQs and the ROCs, because it wasn't just the standard that was updated. Of course, there's other documents that everyone needs to be aware of. But Katie, from your perspective as an acquirer, was there anything specific that you noticed as well?
Yes, so we were really keen to potentially see something a bit less technical for those like really small merchants, those kind of level 3 and 4 merchants. And of course, the standard has to work for everyone, so that's not really a realistic expectation. But it just meant that we needed to plan ahead to make sure that we were helping them as much as we could, because in many ways, we are their PCI SMEs. They don't have that function internally. And for example, so my mum, Liz, she owns a fabric shop and has done for 20 years. She knows absolutely everything there is to know about fabric and textiles and knitting wool for a jumper. But PCI DSS, ASV scans, network diagrams, it's not her area of expertise. So for people like her, we had to make sure that we were fulfilling that SME role for them to make sure we could help them with this transition.
I love that family connection. I think that's great. Well, that's great starting with those first impressions, but let's move on to a little deeper into that. What were some of the experiences when you were planning for your first version 4 assessments, and what did you do to help you prepare? And Tomás, I'll start back with you again.
So basically, the most important thing is to read and understand the standard, understand future dated requirements, because there is where the challenges might be lying, and plan accordingly. So you may have been doing ASV scans already, but the frequency may have changed. So that needs additional preparation, maybe even additional budget, and this is something which definitely has to be provided. Right, Josh?
No, that's absolutely right. And one of the things that we identified was the need to do a gap assessment. So we did a couple of things. First, we did a kind of a paper exercise assessment to identify, what were the differences between the standards. And that helped us tell an executive story. And so we were able to get out up front just weeks after the DSS4 was released and get in front of my peer group with the IT executive team and even with our business and CEO C-suite leadership to be able to communicate that, hey, there's some things that are going to be different here. We have time as long as we're thoughtful and we plan through this. So then we did a gap assessment at a little more of a technical level, if you will. And that let us build a project plan, put together estimates, and then start communicating that as a program, if you will, a project/program inside of our organization to get that support.
Right. Yeah. So we took a really similar approach to you, Josh, particularly around that education piece. So one of the first things we did was run a series of workshops for our key stakeholders, particularly in that technical area for our biggest gateway, to really bring them along for the rides so they would know what we would be expecting of them going forward, what was coming up, so it wasn't just a big surprise. And we also made sure that our internal security assessors in our PCI team had all gone through the version 4 transition training, so we all knew what we were talking about, which is also quite key. But yeah.
And I really like the common theme here about gap assessments and planning ahead, and just narrowing down that focus a little, as well as starting as soon as possible, and hopefully everyone is in the position where you have at least started this process, and preparing ahead. What would you say was the most important thing to do first? Josh, you talked about gap assessments. Is there anything specific about that you would recommend?
Really, the point of the gap assessment was for us to understand where are we now, right? We see where the DSS is and where we need to go with version 4, but really the whole point of it was to figure out what of the new requirements, and as well as not just the technical requirements, but the reporting requirements as well, what changed that we have to be considerate of. And so working through that, figuring out where you stand right now, and what you need to do. How do these standards, is it more of an SAQ, or are you a smaller merchant that needs to look at something a little different? Just understand where you're at right now and figure out how you need to get to that 4.0 compliance time.
Yeah, we went down the gap assessment route too, particularly on our, again, like I said, our biggest gateway, and we went for a kind of twofold approach. So our QSA sat down with all our evidence from last year, gave us a kind of preliminary sort of temperature check, and then in this year's our final 321 assessment, he sat down with all our SMEs and asked them all the V4 questions, as well as the 321 questions, to make sure we had that really detailed view of what we were missing. And we also found that completing that responsibilities matrix, that X.1.2, that new requirement, really helped, because it just made it so much more straightforward when we put it through A&D for the business analyst to go out and talk to all the people he needed to, that kind of thing. But also actually, we effectively stress tested it during our last 321 assessment, and it really made things quicker and smoother, knowing exactly who to talk to for each bit.
I think it is really important also to sit down together with your QSA and discuss with him the gaps which might be on the environment, on the requirement side, and create sort of a assessment procedure document. A written basis of collaboration between QSA and merchant, where everything is documented and agreed upon. Because of course, for both parties, it's new, and there might be some interpretation. It can only be solved if you start discussing things together. So this is what we basically did, and for any new iteration, we will fine-tune this assessment procedure in order to have then a common basis of understanding and collaboration between assessor and assessed entity.
Yeah, that's a really good call. If I can add real quick on that fact is, I just reinforce talking to your QSA and talking to your acquirer as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure Katie will have some commentary on that, but that was another thing that we did is, as we're going through the gap assessment, was we sat down with our QSA as part of that effort. We sat down with our acquirer and wanted to understand, are there any reporting changes that they have consideration of? Are our timelines still on track? And having that partnership conversation really went a long way for us to help.
Yeah, we did a lot of work with the acquiring team to sort of help bring them up to speed, and we've put all the small merchant advisors through lots of more training so they know how to answer any questions anyone's got. And it's a two-way relationship. So yeah, talk to your QSA, talk to your acquirer. They're not scary people. They just want to help.
And it is certainly that there's a lot of new things in version 4 that everyone is learning about from the different perspectives of their roles in the process of working towards that assessment. One of the things that is specifically new in version 4 is a customised approach. And I'm just curious, within your own organisations and with your experience working with other organisations as well, if you yourselves are implementing the customised approach, or if you're seeing a lot of people head in that direction, or if you're generally tending to keep with a defined approach for now. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I can jump in and start with that. So right now, we're not looking to use the customized approach. We've evaluated it, and it might be a scenario where we see down the road we might want to change direction and utilize that. I will say a couple of things that are interesting about the customized approach. First off is it provides some really interesting flexibility for the industry, but it's also for those types of entities that have a very mature security governance model, right? So, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're doing equivalent security controls. And so that takes a more detailed conversation with the QSA. I would expect they'd want a different level of evidence, et cetera. So, again, for the time being, we haven't found that we need to use a customized approach, and we're a large entity, and so we found that, again, while the flexibility is there, we found that the current version of 4.0, the new version, has what we need there to comply as it is.
Yeah, as you can imagine, as being part of Barclays, we have a very mature security, environment. So for us, it could, in the future, be a potential option, as our environments evolve. But as a gateway, we've been compliant for 17 years. So, to the standard approach. So it's, for us, at the moment, it's not something we're looking at. And interestingly, we haven't actually had any inquiries about doing it from any of our merchants either, the big ones, because obviously the small ones will still go through their SAQs as usual. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out over time, I think.
For us, basically the same. So customers' approach is, I think, something to be looked at for the future once we are in the V4 mode. Yeah. But right now, we don't see a direct need for implementation.
Yeah.
That's great. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we've looked at where you started and your first impressions, and as you started the preparation. Obviously, understanding what's new in the standard is key, and working with the partnerships. As you went through this process, were there any challenges that you faced as part of your implementation, and how were you able to work through those and resolve those? And Kate, I want to start with you on this one.
So yeah, I've obviously got two perspectives on this. So as a service provider, we were just really keen, well, like the others have said already, to get started early. Because if I turned up to a development meeting at the early part of next year and gone, hey guys, I've got all these great ideas that we need to do for March 2025, my name would have been mud. So starting off early just really helped us in that. But then on the acquiring side, well, like I've said, that language piece and making sure we're communicating effectively and appropriately with our level 3 and 4 merchants and supporting them where they need to. But also, for a lot of them, there aren't that many changes, not really. And so you don't want to overwhelm them and freak them out when it actually doesn't apply to them. So we've had to be really considered about how we put that information across and prepare them for it. But yeah, how have you got on?
Actually, apart from the future data requirements, one of the challenges we foresee is the dependency on service providers. So basically, service providers have the same timeline to complete the assessments based on 4.0. But as we will input them into our assessment as a merchant, this is going to be tricky in the sense of meeting the timelines. There is a risk that we lose our compliance as our service provider is not able to provide us with their updated documentation. So this is something we are definitely looking at and closely monitoring the compliance status of our service providers. But there are a lot of supporting material provided by the Council, like FAQs on the website, where you can talk to your QSA, explain and understand the dependencies between merchants and service providers on that implementation timeline related topic.
We've definitely been really aware of that, not pressure, but that responsibility that we've got as a service provider that, yeah, if it could all go horribly wrong.
Yeah, I'll just have to double down on that service provider side too, is being able to get ahead of that, because the service providers are learning this just as we all are, right, in the industry. And so, you know, there's a concern that some of the service providers are going to need time to do this, which is going to impact, you know, our merchants' compliance, obviously. So the other thing I want to touch on real quick from a potential challenge standpoint is that, and this goes back to, you know, I feel like I'm you know, beating the same drum here on the timeline aspect, but especially in a large organization or even a small organization, you've got a multi-year IT technology roadmap, right? You have a multi-year security roadmap. And so you know, there are a lot of other things going on beyond PCI compliance inside of our organization. And so that was part of the other reason we wanted to get this up front in the timeline, is because we didn't want to, you know, use a sports analogy, slide into home at the end of the DSS compliance period and be time crunched. So what this, you know, being up front in this process lets us work through and balance all the other IT and security priorities that I have to manage, along with our PCI security compliance, so that they can all work holistically together. And so I just say be mindful of that as well.
I love that analogy of sliding home. I can just picture you, you know, sliding into base with the rock.
Got it.
Yay, we made it.
Got it.
No, that's great. And it's definitely a lot of relationships involved here. I mean, we've talked about the relationships within your own organizations, with your different departments, with your assessors, with your acquiring, like, merchant relationships, and also with your third-party service providers and business partners. So it's definitely key that you involve everybody in that process. And even just hearing your three experiences then, it's obviously very different. Even though there's common themes, there's very unique aspects. And, you know, no environment is the same. No two environments will have exactly the same experience. So it's interesting to understand how three different environments are, you know, are dealing with this. And that's, to be honest, that's the value of this panel, is to share experiences across organisations. And even if your environment isn't exactly the same as anyone up here on stage, hopefully, you know, you get value out of this, because there's always going to be similarities, and people may approach something differently. But how you go through those challenges and resolve them, and, you know, the tips that you can take away from you to really overcome, you know, anything that you're not aware of, and build those relationships is great. And I know we can probably delve into a lot of those topics a lot more and be here all day, but I'm just thinking for our audience here, if there was really one key piece of advice or one key takeaway that you would like to share with the audience that would really help them with their version 4 journey, what would that be? And for that, I'm going to start back with you, Tomás.
First thing, start now if you haven't started. I think there is no time left to really meet the timeline if you haven't started yet. So just leave the conference, go back home, and start setting up the gap assessment. I think that should be a clear message to all of us, because implementation is not that far away. A retirement of 3.2.1 end of March, that's not that much time left. I think. And then, of course, talk to your QSA. because fortunately they have already gained some experience in assessing based on version 4, so that would help you a lot. Katie?
Yeah, I think look at it holistically. Don't put off looking at those March 2025 items. A lot of them are progressions from the 2024 ones, so you'd be doubling up the work anyway. And I worked it out because I'm like that. It's about 524 days until March the 31st, 2025, which is about 360 working days, depending on your holiday patterns, which is not that long. So, yeah, that kind of backs up what Tomás said. Start now. And you, Josh?
Josh, I think you're going to get the final word on this, so what do you think?
Well, I think there's really, if I can be so bold as to ask for 2 items that I might take away.
There's always one who asks for an extra time response. Okay, you have 2.
I have 2. Okay, good. Well, really it is, the 2 items I think is you're not alone, and again, get going, right? So the whole industry, right, everyone in this room is working through this, as we saw all the hands raised. The industry is learning, the service providers are going through this. You've got support. The council's there for support. You have everyone in the room that can help each other. Your acquirers are here to help. And even us, as some of us that are BOA members and such, reach out. Talk to the brands. Talk to, there's plenty of opportunities here. So don't try and go it alone. Ask questions if you need help. Again, on the timeline, I don't think I could have said it any better, but just I like Emma's visual. Don't be the one sliding into home base with your rock at the last minute saying, we got it, right? You're going to want some flex time just in case something comes up and you need to work through something. So get some work moving if you haven't gotten far down that road yet.
Well, thanks for providing that nice summary for me. That was a great capture of, I think, a lot of the themes that we've heard up here today, which is don't delay. If you haven't started yet, to Tomás's advice, wait till the end of the conference before you go home and start. Because while you're here, look around you. This is the perfect place to be to get some information. Because as you said, Josh, you're not alone. Everyone here in this room is going through similar things to you. And again, different environments, different experiences, but you're all working towards that same goal, which is, implementing a secure environment, for the payment transactions to take place. And this is the place to be. We have the people you mentioned. We've got the people you have relationships with, your business partners, your assessors, members like these folks who are willing to share their experiences. So, make sure you take advantage of that. And I appreciate the mention of the FAQs earlier on service providers. We're always updating the guidance that we can provide based on the questions that we hear. And we have published a number of frequently asked questions specifically on the topic of service providers, so hopefully they have been helpful. So while we're here, the whole DSS team is here this week as well. Our training team is here. Come and talk to us and ask us the questions so that we can make sure that we can find a place to point you to find those answers. And if we need to create more guidance, then we want to know what that is so that we can do that. And speaking of training, I will just mention, you mentioned the relationship with the QSA is very critical. The QSAs have all had access to version 4 training now for quite a while, so the level of experience now has increased quite significantly since when the standard was first released. And the version 4 training is also available for ISAs and PCIPs, so that gives you the opportunity to have qualified people trained in your own environments, your own organisations, and that can really help as well. So yes, do take advantage of this event to communicate with each other. I would really like to thank our panelists for coming and sharing their experience with us today. And they are going to be here for the rest of the conference as well. So if you see them, come and grab them, put them in the corner, give them a cup of coffee, and then just grill them as much as you like. They're more than happy to talk to you about what their experiences are with PCI DSS version 4. And as I said, come and see us as well. We'd love to hear what you're going through and what you're seeing and what we can help with as far as that goes. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you very much.